Welcome to the National Indian Regional Extension Center, California. This is the second of 4 tutorials on how to attest to Stage 1 meaningful use on California's state-level registry. To complete the core measures, you will need the following: the meaningful use report generated from your EHR, the CQM report generated from your EHR. You will need to know the source of the extracted patient records. Note that exclusions are based on all patient records. Take an exclusion if it applies. An exclusion does not prevent a provider from achieving meaningful use. There are 13 core measures that must be completed. 2 of the original 15 were eliminated during the 2013 update. The first measure is Computerized Provider Order Entry, CPOE. You must first select the source of the data that is being used to support this measure. The first button is for data that was extracted from all patient records, not just those maintained in a certified EHR. For instance, if the data source included patient records that are on paper and not in the EHR, you would choose this button. If the data was extracted only from patient records maintained in a certified EHR, select the second button. It is most likely that you will click on the second button. Some measures have exclusions, and a provider can meet the measure with an exclusion. Be sure to read the exclusions and take them if they apply. For an exclusion that is taken, be sure it is documented in case of an audit. Exclusions that are listed on the Meaningful Use Report is proof. We recommend that you upload the report showing the exclusion. The exclusion for this measure is if the provider wrote less than 100 prescriptions in the 90-day reporting period. If this is true, the Yes button should be checked. A provider can still meet meaningful use even if excluded from the measure. For this provider, the exclusion does not apply and the No box is checked. Just below is an area to upload supporting documentation for the measure. It is optional at this point. On screens that require supporting documentation to be uploaded before moving on, you can upload placeholder documentation. However, you must remember to upload the appropriate documentation before submitting the attestation. You may want to upload supporting documentation or wait until the end. Be sure the documents that are uploaded do not contain any protected health information, PHI. Refer to the numbers from the Meaningful Use Report. Here it shows 844 for the denominator and 844 for the numerator. Enter them for this CPOE measure. Click Save and Continue. Now we go to our next core measure, drug, and drug allergy. The question is whether drug, and drug allergy checks have been enabled for the entire reporting period. This is a simple yes/no answer and will be on your Meaningful Use Report. Click Save and Continue. The next measure is Problem List. Look at your Meaningful Use Report again. The core measures are listed in the same order as they appear in the SLR. Find the numerator and denominator for Problem List and enter it in the SLR. E-prescribing is the fourth measure. Choose the statement that describes your data source. Either all patient records, including those not in an EHR, for button 1, or only patient records maintained in an EHR, for button 2. The exclusion for this measure is for a provider who wrote less than 100 prescriptions in the reporting period. Go back to the Meaningful Use Report, and number 4 has the e-prescribing data. Note that there is a no in the column for exclusion. Enter the numerator and denominator in the SLR screen. For medication list, enter the numerator and denominator from the meaningful use report. The next measure is medication allergy list. Refer to your meaningful use report and enter the numerator and denominator from the report. The seventh measure is record demographics. Look up the numerator and denominator on your handy meaningful use report and enter it on the screen. Congratulations, you are now halfway through core measures. Vital signs is the next measure. For vital signs, you need to specify the source of your data. The top button says data is from all patient records, not just certified EHR records. The second button is from patients maintained only in the EHR. This measure has two exclusions. The first exclusion is for providers who do not treat any patients over 2 years old. The second exclusion is if a provider believes that height, weight, and blood pressure have no relevance to their scope of practice. For the core measure smoking status, the exclusion is for providers who do not see any patients 13 years or older. If the exclusion does not apply, enter the data from your meaningful use report. If you report clinical quality measures to your state that were produced by your EHR, select Yes for this measure. This measure is clinical decision support. If the provider implemented one rule or more for clinical decision support and the rule can be tracked for compliance, answer yes. This measure does not have a numerator and denominator. The clinical quality measures must be generated from a certified EHR. The clinical quality measures are on a different report than the meaningful use report. In the box, describe one or more of the clinical support rules the provider has implemented. The measure for patient electronic copy also asks whether the source of the data is from the EHR only or from the EHR and additional sources such as paper. The exclusion is for a provider or his agent who did not receive any patient requests for a copy of the electronic health information during the meaningful use reporting period. Looking at the meaningful use report, the exclusion applies to this provider. The next measure is for patient clinical summaries. Select the button that describes the source of your patient records. All records are in the EHR or they are from the EHR plus additional sources, such as paper records. The exclusion applies to a provider who did not have any office visits during the reporting period. Otherwise, enter the numerator and denominator. This measure for exchange clinical information has been deleted. Select Yes, then Save and Continue to go to the next measure. Protect health information is the last core measure. Select Yes if a security risk analysis was conducted, appropriate updates implemented, and deficiencies corrected. You have just completed the attestation section on core measures. Before you go to the next tutorial, take note of the supporting documentation you will need to collect. These will be placeholders used in any documentation that is not in the Meaningful Use Report or the CQM report. We suggest that you upload this documentation in the attachments box for the specific measure. Next, go to tutorial number 3 to see how menu measures are entered into the SLR.